I thought the mountain was hollow. Not in the geological sense, no sinkholes, no caverns plotted on topo maps. I mean, it felt wrong underfoot, like walking on the skin of something holding its breath. I told myself that 3 times on the drive up. A joke that didn't land. I'd rented a cabin that promised total seclusion, no neighbors for miles. The kind of place where quiet is the main feature. The photos showed wood siding the color of toast, a chimney thick enough for a century of winters, a deck buried in snow. The owner's directions were simple. Follow a county road, pass a closed campground, take a service track behind a rusted cattle gate. Key is in the lockbox, their message said, wood in the shed. If you need me, ranger office downtown usually knows how to reach me. No one knew I was going. I wanted silence. Phones off, inbox forgotten, no city noise pretending to be life, just nothing. The last bar of reception vanished around noon. The pines leaned closer the higher I climbed. Past the campground, past picnic tables that looked fossilized, the world thinned until even the wind seemed hesitant. By the time I rolled through the cattle gate, the quiet pressed so hard my ears popped. The trees bled black resin, not amber beads, tar-dark veins that slicked down bark into the snow. Where it touched, the snow dented, like something had pushed up from beneath to meet it halfway. The cabin sat in an oval clearing, more absence than space. The deck leaned, the chimney sagged. The door was too new. When I stepped inside, dust rose like breath on a mirror. It was fine, cold, but fine. Wood stove in the corner, a bed frame that looked built by a 12-year-old shrink-wrap film on the windows bubbling at the seams. The thermometer on the wall read 38 degrees. I fed the stove from the stacked firewood. The first log caught, filling the air with the smell every cabin candle is trying to earn. The quiet didn't soften. If anything, it pressed harder, like a rule posted without words. I tried to sleep on the couch that first night, fire burning high. Around midnight, the stove hiccuped smoke pressed down into the room before the draft corrected. I thought that was the worst of it until I heard the scrape. Not skittering, not mice. A slow drag beneath the floorboards, stone on stone. The wood shifted a fraction, like something was testing the weight above. I pressed my hand to the floor. Felt it, steady, deliberate, then gone. I didn't sleep. By morning I told myself it was frost heave, or ice shifting in the soil. Something natural, something boring. But that night the scraping came again, multiplied, drifting beneath the stove, under the bathroom, under my bed. The boards rose and fell in rhythm. Not human, not animal. Too even, like the floor itself was inhaling. I whispered, "No," just to hear something human. I didn't leave. Not yet. The next morning, I stepped onto the deck with coffee. That's when the tree line moved. Something slid between the pines, taller than the trees themselves. For a moment, it looked like a pillar of bark. Then it leaned, and cracks split open to reveal pale matter shifting beneath armor-like plates. Its head sagged forward, eyeless, mouthless, until cartilage ground open in a ring, wet and deliberate. The sound wasn't animal. It was structural, like a building deciding to fail. I bolted back inside and shut the curtains, as if that would matter. The truck wouldn't start. The dash lit up fine, the starter groaned, but the engine stayed silent. When I looked back toward the tree line, there were more of them. A row. Not walking, growing. Plates locking into place as they rose taller, mouths opening soundlessly until the air vibrated hard enough to rattle my teeth. By morning, they were gone. But the floor wasn't. When I woke the next day, the boards around my bed were damp. Black veins ran across the floor, pulsing faintly, leading back to the stove. The iron sagged a quarter-inch toward the ground, as if something below was pulling it down. I called the ranger station, left a voicemail that sounded sane words like possible frost heave and safety issue. No one called me back. By afternoon, the silence had a pulse. Snow fell straight down, no wind, piling uniformly on the deck as if placed there. That night the stove failed again, coughing smoke into the room. I opened the door for air, then froze. One of them stood at the clearing's edge, closer than any had dared. Plates shifting, height adjusting, watching without eyes. I slammed the door, deadbolted it, dragged the dresser against the bedroom door, even though I didn't plan on using it. Sat in the dark with the axe across my lap and the pry bar from the shed in my hand. At midnight, the floor inhaled. Every board lifted under me. The stovepipe bent as if tugged. The temperature dropped 6 degrees in a minute. I yanked up a floorboard. Beneath it wasn't dirt, but fine black grounds threaded with pulsing veins. When I cut one with the axe, it stitched itself back together instantly. The ground beneath the foundation pulsed, pushing into the cabin's frame like a lung exhaling against my ribs. I did the only thing I could think of: fire. I tore shrink wrap off the windows, built a second blaze in the old hearth scar under the rug, fed it books, papers, anything that would burn. Flames licked high, but the smoke flattened under the ceiling like a lid was pressed down. From beneath, a sound tried to form into a word. Not speech, just the shape of it. 30 mouths guessing at vowels at once. That was enough. I grabbed my pack, scarf, axe, headlamp, crawled under the floor again, jammed the pry bar across the seam near the stove. The foundation clenched, the metal bent, and I dumped the stove's ash bucket into the crack. Embers glowed and died like something below had breathed them out. I didn't wait for proof. I ran. The clearing was smaller. Trees leaned inward. The ground caught at my boots, granular like walking on beans. The tall shape waited at the edge, height adjusting, pale matter flexing inside plates. I aimed for the only gap that looked like a corridor and sprinted. Behind me, the cabin exhaled. The sound stripped the heat off my back. I don't remember crossing the gate, just the pin between my teeth, the chain giving, and the road widening until the world finally sounded alive again. Birds, water, a snowplow dragging its blade. At the first gas station, I left another voicemail. The ground at that cabin isn't right. The floor breathes. Something in the trees. Please. I stopped before I said eats people, said hurts people instead. No one called back. That was weeks ago. I thought I was safe. But last night, in my apartment 3 floors up, the quiet shifted. My ears popped. I pressed my hand to the floor and told myself I was cured by data. Then I heard it. A faint drag, rearranging something granular. Not loud, not close. Just the sound of 1,000 hands under a floor, moving, remembering. And I don't think it wants me back on the mountain. I think the mountain is coming here. I just wanted to get home. After an endless day of work, followed by an exhausting gym session, every muscle in my body screamed for rest. But the night was cold, and I had to cross the city to reach the station. The icy air bit at my skin, and the distant sound of cars seemed to echo from a different world. The station was deserted. The fluorescent lamps flickered irregularly, casting long, trembling shadows across the worn tiles. A damp smell of iron and oil lingered in the air, and the sound of the train in the distance felt like a promise of safety. Then I noticed a figure on the other side of the tracks. Tall, dark, faceless, motionless. For an instant, I thought it was just a late passerby, but its rigid, almost perfect stance was wrong. The air around me seemed colder, and every muscle in my body tensed. Suddenly, it was no longer on the other side. It was on the same platform as me, at the far end, standing still, watching me. The silence was absolute, only my heartbeat echoing against the walls of the station. That's when I heard the voice. "Are you okay?" A young man, backpack slung over his shoulders, walked closer, a friendly smile, a calm voice. A savior? At least that's what I thought. He started talking about ordinary things, train delays, the cold, the boredom of waiting alone. Each word seemed to push the fear away a little, but his eyes did not. Slowly, I realized. The friendly smile became too insistent. His fingers touched my arm, a small pressure, but invasive. He tried to come closer, too close. The human warmth that should have comforted became unsettling. "Don't be like that," he murmured, and there was something dangerous, almost seductive, in his tone. And in that instant, I knew I wasn't safe at all. The figure at the far end remained still, watching me, indifferent to the human who tried to dominate me. Without thinking, I stepped back, then ran. My legs, tired from the gym, felt like they were floating. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every dark corner a trap. My footsteps echoed through the empty streets, and the cold no longer woke my body. It only sped up the panic. At last, I got home. The keys trembled in my hands, doors and windows locked. I breathed deeply. The smell of dinner, the sound of the television, my family's presence, everything familiar, safe. But no one knew, and no one ever would. I lay down, trying to convince myself I was safe. But my eyes refused to close. Every sound in the apartment seemed amplified. Every shadow cast by the lamps seemed longer. And it wasn't the young man who frightened me now. It was the figure. What I had seen at the station, at the far end of the platform, didn't seem human, didn't seem real. But I know it was there. Something was watching me with a cold patience, hidden in the shadows, waiting. And now, as I write this, I can still feel it. It knows where I live, and it hasn't stopped watching. I used to think that walking home late at night was calming. The streets were quieter, the city's noise folded down to a low hum, and the lamps made the sidewalks look softer. I learned the rhythm of my route by heart. There was a coffee shop with a neon sign that blinked every other minute, a corner where 3 different smells met and argued, and an alley with graffiti that never changed. Nothing exciting, but it felt safe. That changed last Tuesday. I had stayed later than I wanted at a group project. The train came and went without me because I was sorting a file, so I decided to walk. It was maybe 20 minutes, same route I had taken hundreds of times. My phone had 1 bar and an exhausted battery, but I told myself I did not need to call anyone. I put my earbuds in, turned the music down so I could still hear the world, and started walking. A few minutes in, I noticed something odd. My steps were the only sound for a bit. Then another set of steps joined in behind me. Not loud, not close, just there. I looked back thinking I would see someone walking a dog or a couple laughing, but the street was empty. The lampposts cast long cones of yellow light, and the spaces between them were familiar pockets of shadow. No one walked in those pockets. I shrugged. Maybe a delivery guy had taken a different turn. I kept walking. The steps matched my pace, steady and even. When I slowed, they slowed. When I quickened, they quickened. It felt like walking with a metronome I could not turn off. I turned my head more than once, and the shape of the street behind me remained the same. There was no silhouette, no shadow, nothing that looked like a person. Then I saw the coat. It was hung over a garbage bin by the coffee shop window, a dark coat with a raised collar. It should have been empty, a piece of clothing someone left. But something about the way the fabric lay made it read like it had shoulders, the bend of a neck. For a second, I convinced myself it was a jacket on a hanger. Then the jacket slid. Not across the pavement, not in a wind. It shifted like someone settling into it. I stopped. The footsteps stopped with me. I told myself this was ridiculous. I told myself I had stayed up too late, that my brain was making patterns where there were none. I checked my phone. 40%. Fine. I started walking again, slower this time, the music louder so it could fill the space where nerves wanted to live. The steps returned. I took a different street, the kind that cuts between 2 blocks and saves you 3 minutes. The shortcut had a row of hedges and a single working lamp. I always passed it at this hour because a cab would sometimes park nearby and the driver would sleep with the radio on. Tonight there was no cab, no radio, only the lamp and the hedges. The footsteps sounded behind me like someone walking on a sidewalk that existed only for them. When I glanced over my shoulder, I saw a figure reflected in the lit window of a closed shop. The reflection was only the suggestion of someone, a smear of dark that matched me step for step. It did not have the structure of a real person. It was like seeing yourself in water that someone was pulling the surface of. I do not know what made me do it. Maybe it was panic or curiosity or both. I stopped and turned around fully, standing with my back straight and my feet planted. The air felt thicker, like someone had closed the distance between me and the night. Nothing moved in the alley. Nobody stepped into the light. The coat on the garbage bin remained dirtied and empty. Then the first step landed behind me, right against the lip of my shoe. Not a second after, close enough that the vibration felt through the concrete. I did not feel threatened exactly. I felt watched in the old animal way you get when something that should be separate becomes close. I said, "Hey, can you stop? I'm going home." The voice that answered was not a voice I heard. It was the knowledge that the footsteps had stopped because I had spoken. And then from somewhere behind the hedges, something moved, and a shadow folded across the lamp's light, eating the space where the path should be. I turned and ran. The sound of my own breath came down hard in my throat. I passed the coffee shop where the coat had been, and the coat was gone. The neon sign flickered like a blink. My phone, which had been calm a moment before, flashed low battery and then black. I fumbled with keys, swearing, hands shaking. My front door was stubborn. My neighbor had a key and always left the lock a little sticky. I jammed my thumb in the key, turned, and the door opened with a sound that felt loud enough to be heard down the whole block. I slammed it, leaned my back against it, and slid down to sit on the floor. The city sounded normal. The bus on the main road whooshed in the distance. A couple laughed 2 houses over. I told myself I was safe now. That night, I slept in fits. Each time I woke, I could not move for a second because I was waiting for the sound I had learned to expect. Steps behind me, slow and patient. They never came. At dawn, I went to work like nothing had happened because what else do you do when you are 19 and your rent is due and you need to be useful? Over the next 3 days, I altered my routes, walked with other people, and avoided the coffee shop altogether. The steps followed none of those changes. They seemed tied to me like a shadow that had a mind. I would be in line at the grocery store, and the sound of footsteps would drift through my head the way an old song does. It was never loud, never urgent, but always precise in its timing. On the 4th night, I forgot to take my umbrella, and it started to rain. The city smelled different with rain on the asphalt, cleaner. I walked slowly because the slick pavement took trust. Near the corner where the alley cut through, a man in a bright jacket stood under the same lamp I had passed before. He was holding a paper cup and staring at his phone. When I walked by, he did not look at me. He never did. The steps began again. They kept time. I walked to the crosswalk and waited for the signal. The man in the jacket walked up to the curb, matching his pace to mine, and then he stopped. He did not cross. He stood 2 meters away from me and stared at his phone until the walk signal blinked. When we crossed, he turned down a different street and disappeared into an open doorway. I did not see where he went beyond that. Later, in the shower, I realized the skin at the back of my neck was raised where a collar press might have been. I cannot say if something touched me that night, or if I had imagined the pressure, because fear can copy feeling as well as any hand can. But since then the steps have changed. I can only hear them when I am standing still. They come when I am alone in a room and waiting for the kettle to boil, when my headphones are in and the world has become private. When I move, they stop. When I stop, they begin. I tried to tell someone, laughed off the first 2 attempts. The third time I explained to my friend exactly how it felt, and he said, "Sleep deprivation, man. Get some rest." I still hear them. Last week, I walked to the subway with my jacket buttoned to my chin and my head down. A woman on the platform asked me the time, and I told her, and she smiled and said thank you, and that was that. When the train came, she boarded, and I took my spot at the back of the car. The doors closed, and the lights hummed. I looked at my reflection in the window, and for a single second, I saw another reflection behind me in the glass, exactly the same height and shape as mine, but darker, as if someone had stood just off camera. I turned. The car was empty except for a sleeping man in a suit. When I looked back at the window, the other reflection was gone. My breath fogged the glass, and a drop of condensation slid across where that shadow's face might have been. I cannot say why it follows me or what it wants. I can only say the rules seem simple. It keeps distance, it keeps time, and it only appears when I am still. For now, I am trying not to stand in quiet places too long. I keep the kettle on until it whistles. I walk to my bus stop at a brisk pace. I take calls on the sidewalk. And every so often, when the city gets very quiet and I am pretending that nothing is different, I hear a set of steps that match mine. They do not come closer. They do not speak. They are patient and precise, like someone practicing how to be invisible. If you ever walk home and you hear a pair of steps behind you that always match your speed, do not stop to look for a face. Keep walking. Keep your phone alive. Keep moving. It feels selfish to say it, but I would rather live with the feeling of being followed than find out what happens when I stand still.